a chimp in the same manner you would raise a child.
Sorry, everyone. I warned you of my technical difficulties. Let me give you 1 second.
You're doing great.
Thanks. Let's try this.
In this picturesque California home live Mr. and Mrs. Jack C. Dutton and their famous 5-year-old son, Jerry. And we'll meet the precocious pride and joy of the Duttons because Mrs. Catherine Hart in San Francisco asked for it. And she wrote, "Enclosed, please find a clipping from our San Francisco paper telling about a couple in Southern California who raised a chimp in the same manner you would raise a child. If this is actually a fact, I'm sure millions of your viewers will want to join me in seeing the results of this amazing experiment. Well, Mrs. Hart, after you meet Jerry, I'm sure you'll agree that he's one of the most unusual animals of the 20th century. And if you don't mind, let's just tag along and romp through the day with Jerry." What a wonderful way to start the day. Boy, that toothpaste sure tastes good. You know, a fella can't be too careful about, well, you know. Orange juice for breakfast. Looks like fun to Jerry. None of that canned stuff for him. He's on a do-it-yourself kick. Atta boy, give it a good grind. Oops, don't spill it now. That's good for you. Vitamins. There are chores to be done, but Jerry doesn't mind. He kind of figures he's part owner of the home and the garden, too. Jerry can take a hose off any spigot and attach it to another one, the same as you and I. Let's see now. Better test the water to see if it's okay. Yep, it's all right. Turn it on. Can you squirt it with your thumb? You betcha. You know, Jerry's really like lots of kids. Work can become boring all too soon, but with so much of life new and exciting, who can blame him for monkeying around a little? He's quite a marvelous carpenter, at least in his own mind. One thing's for sure, he needs supervision at all times. No telling what might happen. Oh yes, there's the pruning job. Lucky there's no Tarzan around or he'd be cut down. Jerry can actually saw a 3 or 4 inch limb. Let's see now. What can I do next? Oh, about 300 or 400 palm trees have to be planted. Now, he may look cute to you, but Jerry will work right along with any of the workmen. He'll go down and dig 8 or 9 feet. A most remarkable chap. I mean chimp. Well, all work and no play will make Jerry a dull boy. So a little roughhouse, he can sure do that. But don't think he's rough. He's really very, very gentle. Although he has the strength of a man, he plays like a child. Summertime. Here he comes. Not the best of table manners, but he does have all the enthusiasm in the world. A fork, of course. Let's see. Let's try that salad. Slice it. Oops. Yes, a well-rounded diet will make Jerry a big boy, all right. Well, not too big, or he'll end up in the zoo. A little catch, a girl. Now the beverage. Just a half cup, please. Sugar? 2 spoonfuls. Heaping spoonfuls, that is. He likes it. He should advertise this brand on television. Well, time to take a bath now and shove off to bed. As you know, this can be the problem hour in a great many homes. Chimpanzees don't like water. Jerry, you forgot that, didn't you? Shampoo? Nothing like feeling clean. That's right, a good rinse will do it. Turn on the faucet. And into bed. Well, sweet dreams. You're a mighty bright little fellow, and the Dutton family has done an incredible job with such a little jungle boy. This we all know now, Mrs. Hart, because you asked for it.
Jerry led to jungle. Before we talk about Jerry himself, I wanted to talk about how Jerry came into Jack's life. How did he acquire Jerry?
When they were living on the ranch up in Sunny Hills, somewhere along the line, and probably when they were touring with Serrano, is my best guess. They met up with the Chastain family, and the Chastain circus family. They were circus trainers, chimpanzee circus trainers, primarily in those days. And they became friends or whatever, and Jerry was born and raised from that point. I don't know a whole lot more than that, other than they acquired him because they knew the Chastains and as trainers, as animal trainers.
And they had built, or my understanding is that this 5 acres on the corner of Orangethorpe and Raymond was purchased for Jerry as an environment for him.
Yeah, Sunny Hills in the neighborhood, as Jerry was getting bigger and playing with kids in the neighborhood, and he was getting a lot stronger, and they were getting a little worried. They weren't too thrilled with having a chimpanzee living in the neighborhood. So they ended up buying 4.5 acres there at the corner of Raymond and Orangethorpe, an orange grove. And it did have a little white ranch house, which you saw part of that in the film, the white ranch house, and that's where they ended up moving. And then Jerry helped him build the jungle, and he kept collecting. He had a bird collection also. He had collected tons of exotic birds for a number of years, and so they started the jungle.
And my understanding is that it was the land was purchased in 1950. The jungle opened in 52, and eventually grew to about 7.25 acres. Is that right? And
I don't know about 7.25. I remember that he sold off the strip of land there that became the Akua Motel. It looks like, you know, everybody always thought it was part of the same property, but it had been sold off. And I remember stories of the elephants that they had in those early days, and the elephants coming loose and plowing through the orange groves next to them.
In a few slides, we'll talk a little bit about Anna the elephant, but I just wanted to show these pieces. The pennant on the right is really what got this program started. I'm not sure if it was that specific pennant, but one was sent to us, and it got
And I had never seen this before. It's
come
fun.
down. You can make an appointment with Jane at the Heritage Center, and perhaps she can show it to you. And then we have some stationery here on the left. But here's another picture of Jerry from a postcard that reads, Jerry, the world's most human chimpanzee. See him and his jungle companions in a most unique tropical, zoological, and botanical setting located on Orangethorpe at East Street in Anaheim, California. And that little pocket, you would think it's Fullerton, but it was actually annexed by the city, is my understanding, just before Jack purchased it. At the jungle, there was, I read close to 500 palm trees. A lot of the trees were from China, Mexico, Australia, the Canary Islands, South America, and Arabia. There were snakes, elephants, bears, lion, ostriches, and deer.
And lots of peacocks, which are now in the news in LA County, forbidding you to feed them.
I did not know there were lots of peacocks. But Jerry, was Jerry the only animal at the start of Jungle Gardens?
Well, the birds. He started off with the birds, and then it grew from there.
One story, I searched for a photograph, but I had read a story that before Disneyland opened, Jack wanted to have a big publicity, I don't want to say stunt, but he wanted to get a lot of press. So he invited local newspapers over and reporters over, and there was a mini car, an MG, I hope I'm saying that right, but it was operated by remote control, but there was a dummy steering wheel, and Jerry, all these reporters were lined up outside of the Jungle Gardens, and they were waiting for something, they didn't know what, and out drives Jerry in this little car. As I understand it, the reporters were so shocked that nobody took a picture because their jaws were on the floor. So Jack had Jerry do another lap by, and certainly got the publicity he was looking for. In that same story, and I cannot verify this, but the story goes that Jerry continued driving and he made it all the way to the Orange Plaza, or what we know as the Orange Circle, where he was pulled over by a police officer. So Kathy and I chatted about that a little bit, and we can't verify that story, but Jerry did have a police uniform. Isn't that correct, Kathy?
He did when they were living in Fullerton, because Dad was a police commissioner in Fullerton when they lived in Sunny Hills. And he had his own police uniform and was kind of a mascot to the Fullerton PD.
And was Jerry, once the jungle opened to the public, is it true that one of the walls was glass so that people and visitors could see him in his bedtime routine? Does that sound familiar?
That doesn't sound familiar because his bedroom was upstairs in the old ranch house. Because I've heard a lot of stories from a lot of locals who used to go to the Palms for drinks, maybe dinner first, but anyways, sitting at the bar, and they would put Jerry down to go to bed, and he would sometimes open his window and shimmy down a tree and go sit up at the bar. And various people would buy Jerry drinks. And the bartenders were told, if Jerry shows up, give him a drink and call Dad, and Dad'd come get him and take him back. And eventually he cut down the tree so that he couldn't get out. So I don't know about glass. I've never heard that one, but hey, could be.
Just curious.
Yeah.
What else can you tell us about Jerry? I had heard Walt Disney came to meet with Jack before Disneyland opened. And after Disneyland opened and the animals started getting pretty expensive and a little bit of a headache, which we'll talk about later. But Jack made the comment that Walt Disney was smart because his animals did not need to be fed.
That I heard from Dad. Yeah. He told him he was smarter than he was because Disney's animals did not need to be fed and taken care of.
From everything that you heard or have heard, was Jerry pretty agreeable? I know he sounds like he was curious.
He was very friendly. He would, as I hear it, because Jerry was already gone by the time my mom and he got together and were dating and got married. But from everything I heard, because I heard various stories, a lot of people would take their kids there on the weekends, and they'd be sitting and letting the kids kind of run around, and Jerry would come up and sit down with them. Jerry liked to have coffee and smoke his pipe or smoke a cigar, and he'd come and sit with them. And he was definitely a social being up until he got a little too old and things went south.
And I do want to address that. But I had just on a lighter note, real quick, I had heard that for breakfast in the morning, he would wake up and go down to the coffee shop, and he would a lot of times sit at the counter and hold up a menu, and half the time it would be upside down, but he would move his mouth, and whoever was serving at that time would serve him his breakfast every morning. So sounds like Jerry was.
I would not be surprised, but I don't know that firsthand.
And what became of Jerry, we can talk about that because I think it's important to share what Jack, said even towards the end of his life, that he did regret humanizing Jerry.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, when Jerry started getting aggressive and a little out of control or harder to control, he had to cage him. And when he caged him, that just broke Jerry's his spirit, and he became, just uncontrollable. And Dad had to put him down. And as any of you who were raised on a ranch or had grandparents with ranches or whatever know, that back in those days, you put your own animal down. And he never got over it. Never. And he said at the time, he did say he would never, ever humanize another animal. Because it was too painful.
Thank you for sharing that. I know that's a sensitive area. I know Jerry brought a lot of joy, but ultimately it was a sad ending. As I understand it, Jerry, one of the behaviors that made Jack realize that he needed to be not integrated so much with the public was that he was playing with a child playfully, but a little too rough. And the child was not hurt and the parents did not mind, but that was a red flag. And so, as I understand it, Jack tried to hire caretakers for Jerry. That didn't work out. He tried to find a zoo to take him to, but that did not work out. No zoos would take him because they did not want a humanized chimpanzee. So ultimately he was put down. So I did want to touch on that. And again, thank you for sharing that. There were other animals at the jungle. There was a retired circus lion that didn't have any teeth. Did you hear anything more about the lion, or do you know the backstory on that?
I don't know much about the lion. Of course, that was before we came along into that life, but never heard much about the lion. I remember something about a bear and a honey bear getting loose and going into the restaurant.
Wow.
Uh-huh. The I heard some of the story from the very first waitress that he had ever hired. Um, and she told me years later, her husband was a lieutenant eventually on Anaheim PD, and she told me, that she had to get behind a wall or something, and that she quit that day.
Wow. I can't imagine. Any other interesting animal stories that come to mind you can share with us? I
Oh, there were so many, and the jungle and the whole thing about people coming and then growing into the restaurant and all was really, at some point somebody said, why don't you, I have a Boy Scout group or a Cub Scout group. Can I bring them through and show them the animals and stuff? And he said, sure, and brought them in, and then he opened it up for school kids and different, scouting bluebirds and all kinds of stuff like that. And it was just free for them to come. Then somebody said, you should put a hamburger stand out here and whatever. So he ended up putting a hamburger stand out there. And the beginning of the restaurant itself was actually he bought a tea house out of one of the old Chapman estates. And so it was 4 tables in the tea house, and it grew from there to where it could seat over 2,200 people at any given time.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow.
Mhm.
I know you can
Ah,
tell us a little bit about Anna because that's your sister on the left. Is that correct?
that is baby sister, Angela, and that's Anna. And the guy that's with Anna and the kids in the cart there, kind of just going for a little ride around. His name is Jack the Doll. He lived in Fullerton, and he had been an animal trainer, but he raising a family, he was working at a regular job, but he still kept trying to raise animals or train them. And he had asked Dad, he had an opportunity to get a baby elephant and train it. And so he had a nice big area in the back where he could keep Anna until it was time for Anna to go to a zoo.
How do you know how long she was there? A couple years?
I would say a couple of years. I really don't remember
A- And
when she left.
and as you said, the jungle started, free and did host thousands
Mhm.
of people and kids and community groups for
Yeah.
free. I read the hours were 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. That's pretty late. But you could see some interesting things at night, I imagine.
Oh, and it was the gardens themselves were tropical and beautiful, and it had all kinds of nice uplighting and all. So walking through at night was actually very pleasant. Could be quite romantic, actually.
We have a spider monkey here on the right and Jeff
Yeah,
with one of his birds on the left. Um,
yeah.
Ultimately, what why the zoo portion was closed. My understanding is that it was people getting into mischief and breaking into cages that and lawsuits because of that. I heard that there was a couple that put their toddler in
Oh,
with the lion because they thought
mm.
that all of the animals were friendly. And thankfully, nobody was hurt. But again, I heard that was one of the last straws.
Well, not exactly.
Okay, I'm glad you're here. You can clarify that.
Not exactly. The toddler thing actually happened before we even came into his life, in before 1960, anyways. And yes, they put their child over the guardrails to pet the lion.
Okay.
And the child did get mauled a little bit, luckily rescued quickly and all, but it was, the lions were gone pretty soon after that. And anything, everything else was pretty well kept. Yes, there were several incidents in the 60s in particular where, cages were cut and monkeys were let out and all, but no, the end of the jungle itself was really as an end of a property settlement with his former wife. And so then all the animals went to wildlife preserves. A lot of the birds that were left went to Magnolia Bird Farm. What is that? I think that's in Garden Grove or La Palma, somewhere in that area. And anyway, so that was pretty much the end of that.
Well,
But it always remained free, but it was mostly people coming to eat in the restaurant, and then they would go stroll or go out with the kids.
and wasn't there a story about flamingos getting stolen? Some high school kids broke in and stole some flamingos, and
Yeah, or they would try. And unfortunately, flamingos, their legs are very fragile, so you have to be very careful with them. There were, various various break-ins in the middle of the night or whatever that had happened over time. A couple of times, some were, we imagine, young people had stolen fire extinguishers and would go in the middle of the night and spray the monkeys or spray the chimpanzees, as we had the other chimps there, Punky and Joe. And so there's a lot of
how did he acquire most of the animals, Kathy? You know?
I don't know. I know that he had started collecting the exotic birds back in the 40s. And I don't know if he got those through Magnolia Bird Farm or how those came about, but it was long before, now it's very difficult to do them. And various people, I would imagine, I know that Joe, the chimpanzee, came from Hollywood, and they were looking for a home because, of course, he had been in Tarzan, either the TV program or the movies. But he, when they grow up, when they're in the movies, they're babies or toddlers. But when they grow up, they would send them off, and he ended up getting Joe that way. Not sure about Punky, how that one happened. And just various things I remember. And one of the more fun ones, or at least fun for us, is when we were working at the Palms, my cousins and I and my brothers, was a Mina bird that we had, or that he had gotten, named Joe. And Joe was in the lobby of the restaurant, and my cousin Lisa and I had taught him to say a whole bunch of phrases. They were all nice. But he would say, one of the things that would be kind of funny is if we were in the back, in the hostess station in the back, counting money or checking tickets off or doing whatever we had to do accounting wise, and somebody might have been drinking a little bit coming down from the bar through the lobby, and Joe would say, "Help, let me out." And they'd be looking around and going, "If I knew where you were, I could. Where are you?" Hey, that was fun. Joe was fun.
We have some more of the beautiful birds.
Yes.
Did Jack grow up with animals or with birds, or?
Well, Paul Cott, I think most everybody on this call knows Paul. And one day, well, a few years ago, Paul said, I asked your dad, he said, "Jack, I always heard you were born in Anaheim. Where were you born?" And he said, well, you know where the intersection is of Loera and Broadway? And he said, yes. He said, well, you go south on Loera and the third ranch on the right. So that was his grandmother's ranch that he and his sister and brothers were raised on, his sisters and brother. So I guess that's where it came from.
We could really do an entire program on Jack's life, his life experience and his lifespan and accomplishments. He really was a remarkable man. This is a really great picture. You can see East Street here, Orangethorpe here. The Jungle Garden Zoo was in this area, and the farmhouse.
Well, it's not the farmhouse. That was actually the Shady House, which originally had been a gift shop way back when. But when he and Dorothy split up and were divorced, that became his bachelor pad. And where the gas station was where the house was.
Yeah. And the beauty shop, the name of it, was it the Headhunters?
Headhunters.
Headhunters Beauty Shop.
Yep.
Would a lot of people go get their hair done and then go to dinner? Was that, or did...
I don't know. You know, you could pull up right there and go in and get your hair done and all. They had a pretty good following. I remember that.
Yeah, to me, it just struck me as, wow, that's kind of random, but maybe not. But I see we have the luau area up here. And as you said, that could seat up to about 1,500 people.
Well, when it was originally where we set up everything on the lawn and they used to do the pig on the mound and all of that, it could seat about 1,500. Used to have luau's for the school districts would have them. Rockwell, well, it was Autonetics, I think, back then. Autonetics and Rockwell, Northrop, they would all have luau's, and there was at least one or two a week on the weekends. And, you know, even church groups would have them. And eventually it had to be made in where it was covered and all of that. The health department didn't like you sitting out without a covering. So there was a building.
What was in the terrace room?
Terrace room was another banquet room that seated about 200 people. Had a nice big dance floor. June Glenn can tell you about that. And the only reason I say that, June, is because that's where we used to sit and do stuff envelopes.
Yeah, tell us about your time at the restaurant, Kathy. So you worked the buffet line?
Well, when Mom went to work there as a hostess, I want to say like around 59, 58, 59, we, on the weekends, well, probably went closer to when I was around 10, 11 years old. On the weekends, we go and help serve on the buffet for the luau's. And then, you know, we get paid by being able to eat dinner and watch the show. I knew every Hawaiian song and dance long before I ever went to Hawaii. But and my job was to serve lomi salmon in these little cups. And it was so long before sushi was a thing. And so you served the lomi salmon and poi. And they'd ask me, you know, as a kid, they'd ask me, you know, what does it taste like? And I said, paste.
I agree.
You know, but it was certainly a very interesting, fun time.
Definitely. There's some great pictures here. And did Jack own, or did he lease out the restaurant, or did he run it himself?
It was leased out when it became, when it was being enlarged, and it was leased out, and it was part of the Dinner Horn chain back in the day. And then around 1967, somewhere in there, 67, 68, they went bankrupt. And so he ended up taking it back over and running it until it closed in 1976. And then we worked there. I worked there when I was 15. It was one of my first summer jobs. I worked the buffet at lunchtime, and I got paid a whole $1.25 an hour. But then later, when I was in college, I guess, I think Fullerton College, but maybe right after that, I worked there and doing the accounting, and then I go out and help hostess during the day, maybe work luau's at night.
Did you have any celebrities come through?
There were quite a few, but most of them were Angels players. And most notably, of course, Nolan Ryan would come in with his family for dinner and all. There were others that just came in for the bar that will remain unnamed.
That's very respectful of you.
There were different people, certainly, and I don't remember them all.
You recognize this menu?
I sure do.
I didn't put up the cocktail menu, but I did see that I think margaritas were 90 cents and a daiquiri was maybe $1.25.
I think that was Mai Tais, not margaritas.
Oh, sorry, Mai Tai. My mistake. But this is pretty interesting and fun to look at.
Mm-hmm. And the recipes are somewhere, and I wish to heck I could find them. I only remember the one, the candied banana squash. That's the only thing I remember how to make. Darn it.
Well, at our next potluck, maybe we'll make a special request for you to make some. Were they known for any dishes or meals, or were they known for their food, or was it more about the entertainment and atmosphere?
No, the food. Food, definitely. Oh yeah. There were a lot of different things that people would come in for. The teriyaki was probably one of the biggest ones. Of course, the mahi-mahi. I just saw a little thing in the chat room saying it had best spare ribs, sweet and sour spare ribs. I think that was my sister.
Nice.
There was a Chinese section as well, and we had a Chinese chef who did really good egg foo young and some other things. And of course the menu was a little different for the luau's, but I'm looking here too. Oh, there you go.
Fun brochure, courtesy of Jane at the Heritage Center.
Mm-hmm. And down here in the bottom right-hand corner, those two pygmies, the pygmies are from an Indian tribe in the Philippines, and they were carved out of one solid piece of wood, and I actually have both of those. And I have one of the chairs. I thought it was a Chinese, and then when we had them priced out or whatever, they actually turned out to be Japanese, and they're about 275 years old. And one of them was stolen. Somebody walked off with it. Somebody walked off with Joe the minor bird too. The first time somebody did, they sent him back to the restaurant the next day in a taxi.
That's something I could not have made up.
No. Yeah, things disappear from places. It's unfortunate, but hey.
Now, this was a time where there were other Polynesian restaurants in the area, and would you say this was the most well known not only for the zoo, but most desired, one of the most desired places at the time?
Well, it was definitely one, sure.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, there weren't that many big restaurants or dinner horn restaurants close by. I think,
The scale of it is incredible.
yeah. I've never seen a circular bar that big. The circular bar could hold or had seats for 50 people. And then across from it was a piano bar, which was really an organ bar, but they had cocktail music from live music from 4:30 to 8:30, and then a trio that would come on after that.
Were there any ever any non luau style or Polynesian musical acts or artists or singers,
Oh yeah,
entertainers?
oh yes, yeah. Up in the bar in particular, and there was one guy that his voice was so much like Tom Jones, and he could do Delilah like nobody else. I remember very well because, of course, we could hear him. I could hear him all the way down in the office if I was doing stuff in the office.
That's great. Any names we would recognize? Any well-known artists or singers?
I don't think so. I don't think any of them really became famous.
Just curious.
Well, I do know, like in the luau, the mom of this troupe and whatever, she was Napua, and she was very famous in the islands. And then the Rebuka twins, and I remember them during that time. I was definitely a preteen or a teenager, and they were on Crest commercials. That's all I can recall anyways.
Here's some really cool pictures.
Mm-hmm.
The full house, it looks like, and they're sitting on the floor.
Yeah, we put down the mats and put the plywood down on top of blocks, and then put the tapa paper down. And I don't see a lot of it, but I remember going around and putting down fern across the table, and then putting the banda orchids on them too. That was another job I got to do for free.
We'll have to do a part 2 of this program on specifically the palms. There's a lot of great pictures.
Well, I would be curious to know what recollections some of the people that are on this call, what recollections they have.
Yeah, this is my second to the last slide, and we're at 8 o'clock, so we do have time for some questions. I did have to throw this in for my friends, or I'm sorry, our friends at the Halloween, Anaheim Halloween Parade. This is a float that the Jungle sponsored in 1969, and the theme for the parade that year was Halloween Toyland. So that's pretty fun.
Yep.
And we do need to mention, Jack Dutton did go on to serve 4 terms on the Anaheim City Council. He became mayor, 3 terms. Thank you, Kathy. He became mayor and is said to be responsible for bringing the Angels to Anaheim on a handshake deal with Gene Autry, and for bringing or having the convention center built and developed.
Well, he certainly was one of the 5 that were on city council. And those 2 things definitely were his pride and joy. he, of course, he had known Gene Autry back in the horse days. And so they had a little bit of rapport going into it. You know, he loved the convention center. And during the 4 years that he was mayor, one of the things that he loved the most was going and meeting and greeting all the conventions that came to town. And then going out and promoting. He went out on the first trip with what is now known as Visit Anaheim. It was the Anaheim Visitor and Convention Bureau back then. And he went with Disney and the Bureau and a few others to Japan, made their first trek over to Japan to promote Disneyland. As you know, I'm sure that several of you know that outside of Southern California, if you say you're from Anaheim and where's that, you say, well, Disneyland and whatever, and they'll say, oh, Los Angeles. And of course, my immediate response is, no, we seceded from Los Angeles in the 1800s and we stayed that way. We're 30-odd miles south. And all, but it was one of the things, and he loved to, welcome the conventions to Anaheim, and he understood the economic benefit. But go ahead.
I was going to say, it was pretty visionary for that time. My understanding is that some of the residents and taxpayers were not happy or not too thrilled with that at first, or with the possibility of a rise in taxes. But could you speak to that or clarify?
I don't know that it raised any taxes on the Anaheim taxpayers. I
think it was more the fear of that.
Probably so. It all the convention center came about by the motels, basically a couple hotels and motels around Disneyland, because back in the earlier days, Disneyland was only open on the weekends during the summer and on holidays. So they were looking for ways to have business during the week. And Phoenix had a conference center. And so they said, why can't we? That was the beginning of that. Jane actually might know more about that than I do.
We'll have to have another program on that. We'll have a lineup of to be continued.
Yeah.
But I know this is really about the jungle and jungle gardens, but I'd be remiss if we didn't acknowledge those accomplishments and all that he did here in the city, for the city. A great public servant. We will switch to our audience, but I do want to say thank you again, Kathy, for sharing your memories and for clarifying some things and to adding color to a really fun little slice of Anaheim history and some nostalgia. So I hope everybody has had a little bit of fun. Yeah, it's
watching.
Like in such a heavy time, it's really fun to talk about something that brought so much joy. I am now looking at the chat box for the first time. I have the Magnolia Bird Farm is located on the corner of Cerritos and Magnolia, still open for business. As you said, the Palms had the best sweet and sour spare rib ever. We have a comment to take the wood carvings and chair to the Antique Roadshow.
Sounds like fun.
Do you want to share about the Hawaiian and fire dancers at all? Was that?
Oh, that was just at the luau's. That was probably the main fun part of living, because there was a time that we actually lived on the grounds. My brothers went to Edison Elementary and I was going to Sycamore Junior High School, and the bus had to pick us up, and kids would ask, or people would ask, where do you live? And we'd say in the jungle. I was just, what the heck?
And it was an honest answer.
Yep,
Um,
but the fire knife dances are great, and I know that any of you that have been to luau's or they know that that's probably the highlight.
Definitely. For me, it's never the poi, but let's see. Do we have anybody who would like to share a memory, an experience, or ask a question? I have my eye on the audience. I see Steve. Hey, how's it going? Steve and Susan Fessel.
Okay. Hi, Kathy.
Hey,
A couple of things. Kathy and Susan both graduated from Anaheim High in 1967 and just lost a fellow Anaheim
67.
colonist, 67 colonist, Steve Fossel. And
Jim.
Or Jim. I'm Steve. And no relation, but another great Anaheim treasure.
Yeah.
Kathy, about
Oh,
19.
another Anaheim graduate.
Oh, yeah.
Dr.
Dr. Les Holvey, class of 44, went on to create the largest and most sophisticated cleft palate research facility in the Western United States at St. John's Hospital in
Santa Monica.
Santa Monica just passed away, but enough of the people that died.
thank you.
Kathy, there's my parents, I remember in the early 60s, I'd say 63 or 64, Mom and Dad took me and we went to the Palms, which by the way was a very, we didn't have that many Class A restaurants in Anaheim, certainly. And that was one of them. You either went there or you went to, Disneyland. The Oak Room, I think at Disneyland was the other big one. And for some reason, and I don't know what happened, but I didn't see it on the menu that night. Evidently they had prime rib, and somehow the prime rib landed in my mom's lap. And those were the days that you got really dressed up. A woman got dressed up with her hat, and fur, and everything else to go out to dinner. And that ended that meal, believe me, in a hurry.
Oh my God.
I don't ever remember, Kathy, I don't remember going to the jungle. I really don't. Maybe I did as a kid. I would have thought I would have certainly remembered that, but I didn't. So anyway, that was my recollection.
Thanks for sharing, Steve. And can we just clarify, because there's written a few different ways, the jungle versus jungle gardens. My understanding is that the entire property is the jungle. And then within that, like we saw on the photograph, Jungle Gardens was the zoo portion. And then we had the Palms restaurant and the beauty shop and so on. Is that correct?
But at some point in time, it really became known as the Palms restaurant in Dutton'Jungle Garden.
Gotcha.
And I don't know when that changed, but that first sign that you showed was written one way. And if you look at the brochure, it's written the other way. So
Thank you. Thank you.
somebody must have been helping him with the marketing.
Yeah. I see Joanne joined us after the presentation, Joanne, but I did record it. We recorded it, so we'll send it to you. I had just asked the question if anybody has a memory they'd like to share or a question. Going once.
Looks like Joanne's trying to unmute herself. She's talking.
Joanne, you're muted.
Okay, I made it.
Yay.
Sorry I'm so late, you guys, because I was just looking forward to this. I loved my 21st birthday. I'll quickly not try to drag it out too much. But Jack Dutton, he was just such a good friend of ours, of the Harry Burdick family. And I was Joanne Burdick before I got married when we met. And he donated to my majorette group when we got the train from Anaheim and went back to perform in nationals in Wisconsin. And Jack always, then he became mayor, and I had a host at my house and gave them, time to talk about this airport that he wanted to try to push because Orange County Airport. Now John Wayne was getting a little full. Anyway, my story on my 21st birthday. At the time, I was taking flying lessons out there at Fullerton Airport. And I also was performing at night, 6 nights a week, in the show at the Frank Sinus Moulin Rouge. So Jack, I don't think they had the liquor license yet, but he told my mom and dad to bring champagne out for lunch. So we were the only ones in the restaurant. They opened the restaurant. Jack poured the champagne. And so after that, then we all drove out, I and my car alone, because I had to drive up to Hollywood, do 2 shows that night. And we got out to the airport. And so they had me get up on the stage and talk about how easy it is for women to learn to fly. Because back then in 1954, 55, that was a no-no.
Wow.
Women didn't fly. So then I went out. But I just thought he was so wonderful, and his wife, to open up the restaurant for my 21st birthday and make it so special. I never, ever got over that. So that's it. That's all I will share with you, because I know you've had a long meeting and I missed it, but at least Kristen's going to see if I can go back and rewatch it. I love you guys. I'm sorry I was late, but it's a very important phone call came in, a kind of an emergency. I had to put out the fire. So that's why I'm late.
Well, thank you for
Okay,
being here.
thank you. Thank you, Kathy, for all you do for helping us remember.
Oh, thank you. Happy memories is what I'm happy to share.
Yes, yes.
Thanks, Joe. We always love
You're
to hear
welcome.
your memories.
All right, that was all.
Thank you.
Good job, Kristen.
Oh, thank you. Does anybody have any other questions, memories, stories?
June, you've got to have some.
Oh, I have some, of course. When Steve was saying about his mother and a prime rib, I didn't have that experience, but if you lived in Anaheim, if you wanted to go to the da-da place, there was only one place you could go basically at that time besides Disneyland, after Disneyland came, and that was the Palms. And you had mentioned about not only the luau's and things, but as you mentioned, Kathy, about a lot of organizations having end of year parties or something like that. And as an example, the Teachers Association in Anaheim many times would have their end of year party. So you would walk through the jungle and the whole thing, and then go into the restaurant and things like this. So it was a part, but it was always a ta-da. It was not just a place to go. And when someone asked earlier something about, well, was there another restaurant? Those of us who were around in the 50s know there was another restaurant in Anaheim that had Chinese food, and that was Chung King's. And it was the only place, period, that you could get it.
Thanks, June.
Uh-huh.
Does anyone have anything else before we wrap up? I know when people emailed me to register, there were a lot of people that said that they had wonderful memories there. And as I've said a half a dozen times this evening, the joy that Dutton Gardens brought to people is remarkable. And it's really fun to revisit that right now. I don't see any other hands or any other questions. What I'm going to quickly do is put a link in the chat box. This is my shameless plug. If you're interested in becoming a member of the Anaheim Historical Society, it's $30 for a family per year or $25 for seniors. I'm going to go ahead and add the link now. More important than adding that link and hoping that you'll all become members or renew your membership, we do want to thank you for supporting the Anaheim Historical Society. We want to thank you for sharing your evening with us. We want to especially thank Jane Newell from the Heritage Center, who was gracious enough to scan some photos for us. She's awesome. The Heritage Center is open by appointment only as of right now, but it's always fun to go spend some time in there. We especially want to thank Kathy again for spending so much time over the last couple months as we've put this program together, for sharing your time and your memories with us. It's been a really lovely evening. With that, we will close. I did mention at the top of the program that we're planning our first in-person program in September. We're going to kick off our new year with something special, so please stay tuned. We have our newsletter that's going to be coming out in late July or August. So we'll have a little recap of this evening and the other presentations that we've done. But other than that, we love Anaheim. We're glad that you're here. I see some board members here. Can you wave if you're a board member? And I see some past board members on the call. You can wave too. Thank you all for laying a foundation for a great organization that is committed to sharing Anaheim's history. So I'm going to go ahead and end the call, but thank you again for being here, and we will see you soon. Bye-bye.